Okay, I'm back. I got my kids taken care of last night, fed them some tacos, got them off to school again this morning. So now I'm back. We get to sew stuffed animals again today. So here we are. This is where I left you last night. I took a little reflecting time to think about him, to decide how I felt. As I was looking at him, this is what I want to improve. This little section right here, I want to add a little bit more width here to compensate for the loss in the curve of the gusset. And then the other thing I would like to fix on the body is my tail. But what I would like to do is make it flat instead of come to a point. Then we can add a little tail coming out as a separate piece that will just sit there, that I think would be really cute. Let's do that, get to that point, and then we'll see where we need to go from there. I think I really like the shape of this body. I told you I don't think she's quite big enough to have what we were hoping to add a little pocket here, but I think, like I said yesterday, what I'm going to do is just keep going based on my drawing, and then when it's all done and we put the pattern into the computer, it's really easy to scale everything all at once. So that's my plan. And once we've scaled it all at once, so it's just bigger, we'll have the room to add the little chicks in there. So let's do that. Let me show you on our pattern. Okay, so I have a little scrap of freezer paper right here, and here is our pattern piece. So on here, you can see I didn't have these markings yesterday, but what I marked was actually where the gusset hits and how wide it makes it in that portion. It actually, I have it +3 right here, but it actually is widening 3 inches right here, which is fine. It's okay. But as a transparency thing, so we're all on the same page. But so what ended up happening is I went from a 1/2 inch right here to the ending of the gusset to nothing right here. So we lost, which I think will be about a 1/4 inch that we need to add on this side to compensate for the loss of what the gusset adds, to add back in. Here's the gusset, and it comes up and around like this. So that's where it ends. And this is essentially, this line right here is square to the pattern in that one section. Here, use my eraser so you guys can see that it needs to be square. So this is what we need to add. So it needs to get wider right here. We need to add our 1/4 inch. But then to go back narrow into the neck where we don't want it, it's just going to have to go back like that. So let's try that. I'm going to go iron this on. We'll add that to our pattern. Okay. Also, look what I found in my grandma's stash. This is perfect for all my junk that I've been throwing around, so now I can keep track of everything. I'm so happy. My little foot pin cushion I found. It's so cute. Okay. Okay, so I think this looks a little weird, but hopefully that's correct, to be honest. I'm not sure, but I think based on the things that I've learned, it should be. We're going to see. All right. Okay, it might be a weird pocket, but maybe it'll work, and it'll be awesome, and it'll fix our problem. So we're going to see. Okay. The other thing I'm thinking is this part of the tail, instead of to come to a point, to have a flat piece. So when it comes down, it's going to fold down like this. You can see that. Instead of coming up, I want it to go flat. And I can change that by the shape of my gusset. Okay, if you remember, our gusset ended right here, and we ended up sewing it up like this into that tail. So it went like this. It's hard to hold things and show people. Okay. Went like this. If I cut this tip off, then this will come down like this, and it will be wider. And then we'll have room to add its own tail coming off, which I think will be really cute. Let's redraw this. What we're going to have to do is make this gusset wider at this end so that it's flat. It has to be the width that we want the flat part to be on the back of the tail. So since it's a 1/2 inch, we need this to measure out to 1 inch so that we can sew it together. So let's change our gusset. Need to hold this down, and then we need to widen this. Since it's folded in half, we now need to widen it by 1/2 inch. So let's see. Here's a 1/2 inch. So we need this to go from its widest point to there. And then we'll just trace. We'll cut that out. So let's try this. Let's measure this and make sure we're right. I keep dropping my measuring tape. Okay, so it's 1 inch. Perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna cut this back out again from our grandma fabric, and I'm gonna re-sew it. Okay, I got it all stuffed. Here we go. Look, this spot worked, released some of that tension. So that's a win. This worked, but I think I'm gonna just add a teeny tiny bit more so this curve is a little bit straighter and goes a little bit farther down. Because you can see the difference between the two. It added that little bit, but there's still right here. We just didn't add quite enough fabric there to release that tiny tension right there. Another thing is, I think if you can see, this isn't getting our full circumference there. This stitch line is restricting a little bit. This stitch needs to not be straight, it needs to be a curve. And then the tail, well, it's not exactly what I was going for. I need to think about what I did wrong. Because there was multiple things happening here, because one, my gusset fabric was about a 1/4 inch too long. So I just sewed it on there, but then it did this like puckering thing, which means my angle is not correct, and I need to add more fabric right here to get it to sit flat. So this is not quite right. Let's fix our tail and our neck piece really quickly. I'm gonna go iron this piece on. Maybe if I iron it first, I won't have such a hard time drawing on it without it moving. Okay, here we go. So I'm just gonna eyeball this. I think that this curve was perfect, but I just want this to not be so extreme. I'm gonna go like that. Add that tiny bit more in there to get that to be a little bit more straight, to even that out a little bit. I think that'll be a lot better. It's a little change, but I think it'll make a big difference. Now the tail. It's folding, and it went based on this curve angle up like that. That's exactly what it did. So I need to add that much more fabric in to this edge. So let's iron some more freezer paper on there. So this needs to be square to this edge. It needs to stay a 1/2 inch. So that means it goes like that. I think that's what it is. You know, sewing stuffed animals really works your brain. See? I think that's right. As much as I can get it, manhandle this paper by itself. There was one last problem of the gusset being actually too long. Okay. Here's the thing. After doing all of that measuring, I'm not sure why I ended up with an extra 1/4 of an inch of gusset at the end, because it looks like I followed the line pretty closely, but then when I just measured it, it lines up almost exactly. So I shouldn't have had any extra. I'm gonna chalk that up to bad sewing maybe, and before I adjust the pattern, it just is not making sense. So before I adjust the pattern, I'm gonna try and sew it again after we fix a few things, and then see if I'm still having that problem, and if I am, then I'll look into it more deeply. But I really don't want to adjust the pattern at this point because, like I said, when I did my measuring, it really doesn't make sense that I had an extra 1/4 of an inch at the end. The next thing that I want to do is fix my neckline. Okay, if you can see on here, we actually are coming to a V right here with our seam. That's because we're trying to make a straight line go into a circle. So then it comes up and down, and it's not as extreme on this side, but it is doing it. So really what we would like to see is for this to just go all the way straight across like this and not have that line there. But here is our pattern piece right now. So what it really needs to do, so we know the curve that we need to make because it's a circle, so it needs to be the curve of a circle. Now, don't get me wrong, we don't need, here, let's draw it. We don't need the curve of like a circle. Like if we were drawing a circle, we do not need this curve. What we need is a portion, like if this was a ball, and we had 6 pieces here, we need this curve, which is not nearly as sharp of a curve. So let's erase all of this. So it really just needs to be a gentle, we need the center. We're really just moving right along. I'm feeling good about this. Okay. Next is the head. And set this aside. We'll get our drawing back out. So this really is just a pretty basic circle. I just want it to be a ball with a beak coming out. That's it. So we know the diameter, we know that it's 2.5 inches. So to get the shape of our head, we need to get the circumference of a circle that's diameter is 2.5 inches. Calculate the circumference of a circle that has a diameter of 2.5 inches.
The circumference of a circle with a diameter of 2.5 2.5 inches is approximately 7.85 inches.
Okay.
This is from omnicalculator.com.
Good job, Siri. Okay.
Glad to be of help.
7.85 inches. Siri told me that for a circle that has a diameter of 2.5 inches, our circumference is 7.85 inches. Here's where a little math gets involved for knowing how big to make our circle. If we're gonna sew a ball out of the traditional shape of a pill, like you're thinking of an orange and you peel each of those pieces off, we have to figure out what each of the width and length of those pills are for our specific circle. So to figure that out, we have a pill, and the math equals the width of the pill equals the circumference of the circle divided by number of peels we want. So that's our width. And then our length of each pill. The length equals half of divided by the circumference. So that's the math that we need to be able to calculate what the size of our head is going to be. So let's do that. Our width equals the circumference of our circle, 7.85 divided by, and I'm thinking that we just probably want 4 peels. Divided by 4. 1.9625. So that's going to be our width. And then our length, so 7.85 divided by 2 equals 3.925. Okay, so here's our math, 1.96 for our width. Our length is 3.925. We're just going to round. So here is 2 inches for our width. Here's our center. We'll need that for the length. Then our length is, we're just going to round that to 4 and do 4 inches. We'll do half at the half point. So here's 2 and 2. Okay, so this is the size of our peel for a circumference of a circle that is 7.85 inches, which we got the circumference based on our diameter, and our diameter is based off of our silhouette. Okay, so are we following along? Are we all on the same page here? Okay, so the last part of this that is a little bit tricky is that this edge has to be the same curve as the circle size that it's taking a part of. Let me show you. So here's our circle. This is our length and our width. So that's not drawn to scale, but this is the curve. It's equal to the curve of the circle for the 4 parts. So this needs to be the curve of a circle. So this is the shape of our head, and we're going to need 4 of those. So this is essentially the shape of our head. The next thing that we need to do is determine the shape of our beak. and then figure out where we need to cut in this to add our beak. Future Misty here. I don't want to waste your time, so let's skip this. I spend the next 45 minutes measuring, cutting, and sewing this beak, and it just did not turn out in a way that I was happy. Even though it was a good representation of my silhouette, I didn't think it really looked like a duck. And as you will see through the next few videos, I really end up struggling with getting it to a point that I like. That's the way it goes sometimes. It takes a few tries of sewing and adjusting to really figure out what's going on. Like, what is this, a pelican? I don't know. I'm starting my own creature. Oh my gosh. Okay, that beak was a disaster. I think I'm overcomplicating it. So a traditional beak of a duck is more square, which in my inspiration photos, that's actually not true. A beak of a duck is not square, but that's how everybody draws it, so you know it's a duck. Okay, if we do more of a square beak like this, then I think what we can do is just have, instead of 2 bottom pieces to get that curve that I thought would be so cute, if we just draw it, okay, that's wrong because that's not even what that would look like. So from this side, it would probably just look more like this, right? But then from the top, we could give it this traditional duck shape. We could just have a simple top and bottom piece that is this shape. I think that should work, and then we're not overcomplicating it. I have a way of definitely overcomplicating things. Let's get some freezer paper. Then to go around the head, see that curve? We're gonna have to take that curve out so it's sitting around the head. Because how deep do we want it? Remember, we have to add enough length on the sides to compensate for how much we need to wrap it around to get this depth. 1 inch. So we need to add a 1/4 inch to each side to compensate for the curve that we're going to add. Okay, let's try this. I'm going to go cut this out, then we're going to attach it to the head. See how it does. Okay, here we go. We're going to Sharpie marker this. Okay, how do we feel about this? Let's see here. That's so funny. I'm still laughing about that beak. That was ridiculous. All right. This definitely looks more like a duck beak. Okay, this is how I'm feeling. It's not like dainty, like a mom, a female beak. It looks kind of just like a big bulky man beak. What would I do to make it more feminine? Curve it in. Oh, that's kind of cute. Wider at the tip. Maybe we'll do that. If we just bring it in like that, that affects the shape without the size. Let's see what that does. I think I like that better. That makes it just a little bit more tucked in. One last thing I want to try is we've got this curve down here so it sits nicely, but I think I'd really still like it to come up like this. So I think all we need to do is invert this curve so it sits up like that rather than up against the curve of the circle. Okay, here I go again, tweaking that beak. I finally get a shape that I like, but at this time I still cared about trying to make the upper beak have that curved shape, which made me continue to really struggle. So this beak also doesn't end up working out. But among all this beak confusion, I show you an awesome trick that makes inserting beaks and muzzles much easier. Let's keep going. I have one more thing I want to do to this beak, because this is not a design choice of how we want to make it look, but it is going to make it super easy to sew on. Currently, the way that we have it designed is we would have to sew a circle. We would sew the whole face on and then add the beak separately as a circle and have to ease it in. But if we change the pattern just a little bit, it'll make it so much easier to sew in. What I'm going to do is cut with scissors straight down here until we just have a tiny hinge. Okay, then we're going to iron it on to some freezer paper. Okay, we're going to just add just enough of a dart in this that when we sew it up, we'll sew up the neck and into that dart to close the whole thing off, which will give us room to pin it in and have that room in the fabric. Okay, so this is what I ended up doing. I cut a line clear down to here, but we didn't need to make the dart that big. We just needed to make the dart big enough so we can sew it closed, which will work out in our favor for sewing it closed with the head open. The next thing that we need to do is measure the length on our neck so that we can remove what we need to from the head. This has the length of 2 peels on it. We need to be able to attach it by 2 peels worth. So we've got to take off half of the length of this neck on the peel. Let's measure what half is. So this is 1 3/4 inch. Okay, so we need to remove 7/8. Now, because this is going to be in a circle like this, we really do have to remove the shape of an actual circle this time. So our total circle is 2 of these, right? So 6, so 1 3/4, and then another 1 3/4. So it's 1, 2, 3.5 inches our circumference, which we probably figured out before, but here. So now we're going to just line this up. So we need to remove 7/8 of that on this circle. So let's see here. If we put this in the center of the circle, then we're almost there, halfway there already. Okay, so 7/8, that's just right there. Okay, so let's make sure that's really 7/8. It's hard to see, sorry, but that's 7/8. So remove this. So that is our neck piece, and it goes half of this. And then obviously we have to do 4 of these. So it will go 1, 2, and then on the other side too. All right, so there's our neck piece. And then we also need to do our mark where our beak is gonna go, which is a little bit trickier. This is what I think I'm gonna do, is just cut this out. Okay, so that is the shape of our mouth. It might not be perfect yet, and we can adjust if we need to, but it's a good starting point. We have 2 things left to do after that. We need to make our feet, and then we also need to, which feet should go pretty quickly, I think. Those are not hard. And then the last thing we need to do is decide on how we're going to make those little babies. Yeah, this has been super fun. Okay, so I'm going to end that here today. We'll sew it tomorrow, and then keep going on finishing it up. Thanks for watching today, guys. See you later.